out on YouTube, Facebook, and X. And for the premier sports talk experience, tap into our Roku channel. Start your mornings with Mac and Jack covering all the weekend sports action. Then pour a cup and enjoy all the sports you can drink on the Coffee and Sports podcast. At midday, talk sports from east to west on the Coast to Coast podcast. Followed at night by some hot girl talk with Prim and Proper Sports featuring Sonia Pearson. Talk boxing on the Gloved Fist. Yankee fans tune in for Start Spreading the News. And there's more on the College Sports Huddle and Sports Scope with Robert Butler. And that's just a sampling. There are 20 podcasts in all and 70 weekly shows giving us a 3.4-star viewer rating. To find us on Roku TV, search for National Streaming Sports on the Roku search bar. Click on the logo and you're in. For laptops, mobile phones, and tablets, download the Roku app. National Streaming Sports, live and on demand, sports talk for America.
Football season is here, and SeatGeek is my go-to for buying tickets. Now, with SeatGeek, every single ticket is backed with their buyer guarantee. We've all had plans change, and when you can't make it to the big game, SeatGeek has you covered. They're the only ticketer that allows you to return your tickets ahead of the event for credit with SeatGeek swaps. So when things come up, I know that my tickets won't go to waste. So what are you waiting for? Download the SeatGeek app to maximize your possibilities and
Yes, sir. Good morning. Welcome to the Mac and Jack Sports Show Wednesday edition as we hit our midweek mark. Let's see. There we are. I'm back on with Jack. I'm fooling around behind the scenes, folks. That's all. So good morning. Welcome. Everybody down south getting the snow. Everybody up north, we're really cold. We're below zero. So there's your quick weather report. As you know, I like to bring you that every Mac and Jack Sports Show. But Jack, speaking of hot and cold, we had an MLB Hall of Fame induction, or at least the finalists were announced. And, you know, Ichiro Suzuki definitely should get into the Hall of Fame. CC Sabathia, I'll go with that too. It definitely should be in the Hall of Fame. And Billy Wagner, who was second in stats to Mariano Rivera. So I think he's a good choice. A couple of guys that didn't make it. Beltran was one of them. Carlos Beltran got a big percentage. A lot of people expect him to get it next year. Now, there have been some, I don't want to say kickback, or some people saying, well, Beltran's a cheater and shouldn't get it in. I want to get your thoughts first on that.
I don't know, but he should get in next year because his percentage was high, unless, if you want to compare him to the PD users or the guys accused of it, like the Manny Ramirez is, okay? For example, Manny Ramirez was more of an impact player than Carlos Beltran. I'm not going to say a better all-around player because Beltran was better defensively, and Beltran was a wonderful player, and he came up big in the postseason. But Manny Ramirez was more of a force. Sammy Sosa was more of a force. A-Rod was a better player, clearly, than Carlos Beltran. And they're not anywhere close to getting in because of the PD situation and whatever. But it's actually turned in large part into the Hall of the Very Good now. Ichiro was a clear-cut choice to get in under any measure. A great, great player. You can argue that he's an all-time great player if you want. If you count the number of base hits he got in Japanese baseball before coming to the major leagues, it exceeded Pete Rose's, actually, but Rose holds the major league hit record. But Ichiro actually got more hits, in professional baseball on a high level. But, CC Sabathia, under normal conditions, if we're not calling it the Hall of the Very Good, he would normally be a borderline choice. if our standards are really high. But since it's the Hall of the Very Good, he was a slam dunk to get in. And Billy Wagner wouldn't get in under normal circumstances. If we look at it like the Immortals get in, he just would, come short. And it's taken Billy Wagner forever to get in, as, things are. So actually our greatest players, who the Hall of Fame was made for, aren't in the Hall of Fame. I mean, I'm talking about in recent times, like the Roger Clemenses.
Yeah.
I mean, the Barry Bonds. I mean, how's Bonds not in? Alex Rodriguez, how's he not in? We know why they're not in. But those are generational players. Those are all-time great players. And that's what the Hall of Fame was made for. But instead, you have the Billy Wagners, the Scott Rowlands, wonderful players. I'd love to have those guys on my team. Are you kidding me? I would love to have them on my team. What team wouldn't want those guys in the worst way? But we talk about Hall of Fame. And also, I know you were going to bring up, Mac, the players who fell a little short, like an Andrew Jones. People keep thinking next year is going to be Andrew Jones' year. Finally, he's running out of time. Andrew Jones was great defensively in center field, not so much with the bat. He got off to an outstanding start in his career, but then he kind of tapered off at the end, and he kind of hurt his case a little bit. How much premium should we put on defense? That's a great question and a great issue to come up. I think we should put a lot on it, but we don't do it. Mac, when we look at a guy's statistics in baseball, how often do we look at his fielding statistics? We virtually never do. I mean, we look at a pitcher, games won, maybe games won, lost. We look at his ERA. We might look at his strikeouts. But about the only thing we look at defensively is, well, how many Gold Gloves has he won?
Right.
And even then, what does it mean? Keith Hernandez has won 11 Gold Gloves, Mac. That means for 11 seasons, he was the best defensive first baseman in the National League. He's not in the Hall of Fame. He's got to wait on the Veterans Committee. Who knows whether he ever gets in. Don Mattingly, 9 Golden Gloves. That's in addition to, his bat at 307 lifetime average. And what is our yardstick of measurement? That's the thing. Are we going to keep changing? Like before the show, you and I were talking about things like batting average. That used to be the ultimate thing, how they judge someone. Oh, what's his batting average? I even mentioned Mattingly's batting average. I'm even spoiled. What is the on-base percentage? That's what I want to know. On-base percentage, because if a guy keeps getting on base, there's a skill to drawing walks, Mac, and we don't consider that enough.
Yeah, I mean, it gave me a lot to unpack here. First of all, I don't count the Japanese league. When you talk Hall of Fame, the United States Hall of Fame, I don't count Japanese league. I mean, if you're going to do that, you should count, the minor leagues for Pete Rose and for other players. I don't count that. So he still had 3,000 hits over here. So that, to me, definitely, you're right. That's a slam dunk. Andrew Jones had 10 Golden Gloves. He had some power. He had like 474, 75 home runs. The guy had some power. He played on some really good Atlanta Braves teams. So, I mean, if you're going to hit 474 home runs and you're going to have 10 Golden Gloves, as a center fielder, first baseman, I get. I mean, first baseman is not a harder position in center field, Jack, to play. Center field is a harder position. I mean, you got a lot of area to cover. You got to hit the cutoff man. You're throwing people out. That's probably the premier position in the outfield. So to me, Andrew Jones, he got 66% of the vote, 66.2% of the vote, and he dropped from last year. I think that guy belongs in a Hall of Fame. I think defense means something. So
defense means a lot, Mac. But I'm looking, sometimes guys compile things over years.
Sure.
I mean, you take a player, for example, who, let's say a pitcher, he pitches 20 years. He lasts, he has durability. and he's a good pitcher, but not great. Wins 15 games a year. Goes
Right.
like, let's say, 15-13 every season. He has 300 wins before you know, and you'll say, oh, 300 wins. You got to put him in the Hall of Fame. I mean, I'm looking. Andrew Jones had 17 years in the big leagues. Totally, he had 434 homers.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty impressive. He knocked in close to 1,300 RBIs. But that's pretty impressive, too, you know, being a full-time player. But you look at the amount of walks he had, he didn't particularly draw a tremendous amount of walks, 891 in 17 years. You know, that's so-so. But if you think Andrew Jones was the best defensive center fielder for a good decade or so, or more than that,
Right.
that should heavily weigh into it. Because think of what doesn't, like you said, think of what doesn't show up in the stats. The guys he robbed the hits, the way he changed the offense on the other team by where he was playing. You know, there are a lot of little intangibles that come into it that should be considered.
And, you know, I think walks are important, but you don't drive in runs for the most part if you walk. I still think a batting average of over 300, at least over 300, should be a stone, like a marker. Because, you know, you can walk all you want, but if you're not driving in runs, I mean, unless the bases are loaded, pitcher walks.
We're not talking about RBIs here, Mac. We're not talking RBIs. We're talking batting average here.
Right.
There's a difference
but you have to hit the ball to drive people in. Yeah, you walk, you don't drive people in, Jack. So, I mean, there's something to be said about a batting average. I'm not saying it's the whole thing. I'm just saying a batting average about 300, driving in about, 80 RBIs a year. I think there's really no rules, Jack. I guess that's what I'm getting to, right? There used to be 300 wins, 3,000 hits, 500 home runs. There used to be marks. I don't know if there's any marks anymore. I think there should be some rules, and Golden Gloves I think should be part of it. I think defense should be a big part of it. And I think most of these things should be hit by a player to get in the Hall of Fame. How's that?
Yeah, I don't think you can set a marker and say, okay, if you do this and this, you automatically get in the Hall of Fame. It's a matter of opinion. Myself, I normally judge by the naked eye. Like if I've lived through a player's era, I can't talk about Joe DiMaggio and Ted Williams. Obviously, they were all-time greats, but I didn't live through their era when they were playing. And the players they played against to give an opinion whether they were valid Hall of Famers or not. Obviously, DiMaggio and Williams were, but I've lived through an era with players to have a feel of how great that they were, whether they belonged, whether they didn't belong. And a case of Andrew Jones, I mean, I didn't consider him a spectacular defensive player. I didn't consider him like along the lines, of a Willie Mays, who would come up and make these great catches. He was excellent. That's how I would judge him. He was an excellent center fielder, and it resulted in him winning the Golden Gloves. But does that make him a Hall of Famer? 434 homers, that's a lot of homers over your career. That's a lot of homers. He lasted a while. He had a long career. And, he was on one championship team with the Braves. But is Andrew Jones a great player, or is he just a very, very good player? That's the point about it. If I had to tell you to choose between very good or great, you would probably put him somewhere in the middle. You'd have a hard time choosing. But if you had to pick one or the other, saying, is he great or very good? I would lean towards very good if I had to pick one or the other.
I watched Andrew Jones play. I watched him play. I watched him play in the World Series, watched him play in the playoffs. And the guy covered center field. He was unbelievable, Jack. He was an unbelievable center fielder, and he would come up with a hit every now and then. So, with 1,300 RBIs is nothing to sneeze at either. But I think if you're going to if you're going to put in players that are offensively better than average, but they weren't good defensively, why can't you put in a player that was really, really good defensively and a little better than average offensively? That's all I'm saying.
I would be good with Andrew Jones getting in because of his 10 Golden Glove awards.
Right.
But to my naked eye, okay, and this guy's a Hall of Famer, Kirby Puckett to Andrew Jones. I think most people pick Andrew Jones. I would take Kirby Puckett. To my naked eye, watching the two of them play, if I could have one play center field for the New York Yankees, they were both young going forward for years to come, I would take Kirby Puckett because I thought he was more impactful, but Puckett's in the Hall of Fame. If Jones gets in with the yardstick of measurement being what it is today, the Hall of the Very Good, I would be comfortable with him getting in right now. But the other guys I mentioned were not getting in the Hall of Fame because of PD use, other controversies, the Bonses, the Clemens, the A-Rods, the Sosas, the Ramirez's. They were better players. They were more impactful players, and they're not in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. I get that. I understand.
Yeah,
that.
we say they cheated. We say that they cheated. But when steroids allegedly were used, were they legal as far as being used? No one said it was okay, but were they banned? And Bud Steeling, who oversaw all that and allowed it to go on, he's in the Hall of Fame.
Sure.
I mean, Bud Steeling couldn't, I know he wasn't naive. We can't say he had no idea what was going on. There was a lot of controversy before Barry Bonds broke Hank Aaron's all-time home run record, whether or not Major League Baseball put a stop to it. I guess they couldn't because there was no evidence of anything. But, he didn't handle the steroid era, as well as, he should have, Bud Steeling, but he's in the Hall of Fame.
Agree. And you'd have to agree, if it wasn't for that home run race between McGwire and Sosa at the time it happened, baseball came back to life again because of that home run race. I mean, baseball was that perked people back in. That brought people back to baseball, and they both are.
And there are a couple of players. There were a couple of players who are in the Hall of Fame now, who we strongly suspect a few of them were on it. Okay, yeah. I mean, I'm not naming names, but I'm pretty sure they were. And Major League Baseball is kind of turning away from it. All it takes, I think, is one player who's in the Hall of Fame now, who steps forward and, has a conscience that, look, I got to be honest about it. If you want to take me out of the Hall of Fame, you can. But I used it during the time. I think it's wrong for me to be inducted, to take me off the Hall of Fame if you want. Because I don't like the idea of the other guys who can't get in. I did the same thing. What's right is right. Either one or two things will happen, Mac. They'll take them out of the Hall of Fame, and that'll create a controversy. I'm sure there are a few others. Now let's look into them. Or it'll ease the way for the guys who are not in the Hall now to maybe have a chance, a little more of a chance.
Maybe. I mean, I don't know any guy that will say take me out of Hall of Fame, but it would. You're right. It would make them take a second look at a few other guys that are in there right now. Go ahead.
I was just going to say with the current baseball situation now, the Hall of Fame is always a nice controversy that goes on throughout the year. But I don't know, are we wrapping up baseball? But the Dodgers made a big signing for reliever Tanner Scott. The Dodgers are so loaded now. They are so loaded. I don't have to wait for my prediction as far as which team is probably going to win it all or who's the favorite. I mean, how can you pick against the Dodgers? I mean,
not with all that talent and pitching. I don't know how you do that either. So let's talk a little bit about the national championship. Will Howard, young quarterback, couple touchdowns. The running back Judkins ran for a couple touchdowns. Future star, this wide receiver, Jeremiah Smith, Jack, 88 yards and one touchdown. he's unbelievable. This kid could play in the pros right now. I don't think he's eligible yet. I think he has to wait a year. But that kid is unbelievable. He's big, he's fast, and he dominates games. So Notre Dame goes down 21-7.5. They come back. Riley Leonard has a decent game, a couple touchdowns, passing, one rushing TD, and wide receiver Jaden Greenhouse has 128 yards and a touchdown and 2 touchdowns. So first, Jack, everybody was down on their head coach. I'm trying to remember. I think it's Ryan Day was his name, if I'm not mistaken. They're all down on him. He lost to Michigan, blah, blah, blah. We don't know. Even if he wins a national championship, he still might be fired. If they fire Ryan Day, they're out of their mind, Jack.
They're not going to fire him. No, come on. Get out of here. Get out of here.
So, and Notre Dame just can't win in postseason, Jack. I mean, I know, listen, I know they're at a disadvantage. Kind of got in a debate with Tipton on his show. They don't pay as much in NIL as some of the schools, and that Notre Dame had a good year. I imagine Lincoln Riley will be back because he's not a professional quarterback. He's not going anywhere. But Notre Dame, when they play these bigger schools, even though they play pretty good, I don't know how good Ohio State was compared to the rest. Still can't get over the top, Jack.
Well, they had success in the playoffs. They went to the championship game. I mean, only one team wins it. I mean, they had a heck of a year, Notre Dame, and they were competitive. I mean, they came back and cut the lead down to 8 points when it looked like they were going to get blown out. I mean, they started the game great, taking the ball down the field, scoring a touchdown. If they were going to upset Ohio State, that was the way to do it. We knew they had to get off quick and assert themselves. They did. Then Ohio State goes up 21-7, and it just looked like it was going to be a blowout. It wasn't going to be a game, and they made it interesting. And then you had the controversial call with 9 minutes and 34 seconds, I think it was. Notre Dame is down 16 points, and they kick a field goal. I think people have been a little too hard on Marcus Freeman with that move. And I'm going to tell you why. They would have had to get 2 touchdowns and 2 two-point conversions. The chance, just to break even, just to get even, the chances of doing that and then winning the game were pretty small. At least, you kicked the field goal. Now you're down 13, and your mindset is different. 2 touchdowns wins the game. We don't have to get the 2-point conversions anymore. If we get the 2 touchdowns, we'll kick the extra points, which we probably make, and we win the game, as opposed to 2 touchdowns and 2 two-point conversions just to get it into overtime, to get it into overtime. And then you figure, okay, you make it, you have 9.5 minutes left. If we could hold Ohio State, we could get the ball with 7 minutes left. We can get a touchdown and score and still get the ball another time. I understand, the logic behind what he did. I'm not being too critical on it. I saw it conjured up crazy memories to the early Super Bowl years when the Cowboys played the 49ers in the playoff game under Tom Landry. This was crazy. There were about, 6-7 minutes left, and Dallas was down 28-13, and Landry kicks the field goal to make it 28-16. And they actually then get 2 touchdowns after that and pull the game out, the Cowboys. But listen, Notre Dame, great season. You heard rumors afterwards in the locker room. There was some crazy things were going on. The way the players were acting, they were so distraught and upset. But, losing locker rooms are distraught and upset. I didn't like what I was hearing coming out of it. I don't like players yelling at reporters. I don't like coaches telling reporters, don't ask these questions. I don't like that. I guess Marcus Freeman had no idea that would go down. Now that he knows something like that can go down, I think him and all coaches have to address that beforehand. If we lose a game, you speak to the reporters, okay? If you speak to them if you win, you speak to them if you lose. If you're so upset at that moment, will allow you to go in another room to cool off. But you're not to go with the media. You're not to go crazy. You're to conduct yourself the correct way. You know, you're going to act like champions, win or lose the game. That's what the coaches have to stress beforehand. And they have to stress behavior on the field, how players should act.
Yeah, definitely.
Coaches deal with it after it happens. Deal with it before it happens so it doesn't happen.
Do you think maybe there should be after games, especially with a team that lost, I think there should be like a cooling off period before the reporters are let at these guys. These guys just lost. They're changing. They're ticked off. They're crying. Do you think maybe there should be a cooling off period, Jack? Just 10 minutes. Don't let the media in. And then after 10 minutes, let them kind of, you know, I know 10 minutes is the right amount of time. I'm just throwing that out there where they can just kind of cool off a little bit before the reporters start coming in there and start, you know, hounding them with questions. Think that would work out?
Well, they have it in baseball. I think there's a 20-minute thing. I heard Derek Jeter talking on that series on him that there's 20 minutes before the reporters could come in to cool off. But you can't just face them when things are going well. Look, I feel for Mark Andrews, you know, his fumble, his drop in the game. He picked a terrible time to play arguably the worst game of his career in the playoff loss. And he feels terrible. He's probably thinking how he let his team down. He feels absolutely devastated. I feel for him, a truly great player, possible Hall of Famer. But had he caught the winning touchdown pass and he played a great game, he would have been probably facing the reporters, smiling, joking around, you know, in a great mood. You can't just face them when things are going your way. That's a life lesson. Look at Scott Norwood. He misses the field goal against the Giants in the Super Bowl, yet he faces the reporters afterwards. And I remember the reporters saying they cringed. They felt his pain themselves. Michael Kay talks about Mariano Rivera after the blown save in Game 7 against the Arizona Diamondbacks in the World Series. He said that's what impressed him more about Mariano Rivera than his pitching. He faced all the reporters. He sat there, he answered their questions, and you know, and that was that. I mean, he didn't go and say, I can't talk to them. I'm too upset. If you're too upset to talk to them when things aren't going your way, you can't then talk to them just when things are going well. You just can't.
Well, Mariano faced them after the 20-minute cool down that you mentioned in baseball, right?
I guess. I mean, yeah, well, there should be a time. I agree with you. I don't know whether they have in all sports. The players should be allowed to go into the locker room, and they should be given a certain amount of time to compose themselves.
Sure.
I can understand once in a while, Mac, a player, a coach doesn't meet the media, but then he meets them after and he says, guys and ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to meet with you. I did. I couldn't speak. I was so devastated. You don't know how I was feeling then. You know, even if he met him the next day or something and say, believe me, I know the right thing would have been to be out there with you. And it's not that I didn't want to. I wasn't disregarding you. I couldn't get myself together. I was so distraught. Or the word should be gotten back to them through the PR guy that the player, the coach, they're so distraught now, they can't get themselves together. That's how upset they are. You know, and then maybe before they leave the arena, they see a few reporters. I know it's hard, you know, a devastating loss. It's so upsetting at that moment. Moment. Yeah.
So Troy Aikman and Buck, is it Joe Buck or I forget his first. They've been very outspoken, more than I've ever heard them in their games. I mean, you know, when they did the Kansas City game, and Patrick Mahomes slowed down, and then he gets touched and he flops. Of course, Troy Aikman says, well, the NFL or the league should take a look at this in the offseason. And players do flop, as you see. Somebody goes to hit them and they flop back in football. The NBA has a rule. I think the NHL has a rule now. You can't flop. It's a penalty. So Troy Aikman's saying, listen, if this is what they're going to start doing, maybe they should take it and penalize these players like they do in the other leagues, Jack. What are your thoughts on that?
When Troy Aikman talks, I listen. This is a Hall of Fame quarterback who suffered several concussions throughout his career. Believe me, no one wants to see a quarterback protected more than Troy Aikman, but he knows their limits. It's football. It's football. He feels for the defensive linemen, the defensive ends, the safeties. They're running after quarterback to tackle them. And all of a sudden, they're supposed to just stop at a snap of the finger? I mean, turn the switch off while the quarterback is faking like he's going to go out of bounds, then stays in bounds. Patrick Mahomes running to the sideline and then stopping. And, right before he gets to the sideline, then wanting to take a little step out like he was hit out of bounds, trying to draw the penalty. That should have been a flag on Patrick Mahomes. I would have, what I would have loved to have seen, Mac? This would have been historic. If I was an official and I did this, let's make believe I was an official. Would this have been historic? I would have thrown a flag on sportsmanlike conduct on Patrick Mahomes. Could you imagine? I would have loved that call because that was unsportsmanlike. Let me go a step further. I don't think the quarterback should be allowed any deception at all. Like what Dan Marino did years ago. It was legal then. You're faking like you're going down on a knee, then throwing the ball. If you're going to give these quarterbacks the protection, you can't deceive the defense at any point. If they see you're running directly to the sideline, and I'll go a step further. How does this sound to you, Mac? If a quarterback is clearly running to the sideline, like he's going to go out of bounds, you could blow the whistle right before he goes out of bounds. Play is dead at that point. It's over. And the quarterback is told you were running directly at the sideline. You weren't running along the sideline like you were going to pass. You were not in a passing position. They've got up the defensive ends again. Defense is getting raw. Even the cornerbacks, Mac. That's such a disadvantage as is because they're playing against world-class receivers who know what they're going to do. The cornerback could just speculate and follow the receiver, what he's going to do. It's not a big deal. So if you grab him 1 second, is it affecting the play? Are you affecting his route that he's running? Are you affecting him getting the ball? Then it should be a flag. Otherwise, I don't want to see these flags thrown. It's crazy.
Yeah. Troy Aikman also, they had a referee. They have a referee on every, I think, every broadcast now. The roughing the passer penalty when Patrick Mahomes ran out of the pocket, was running down the field, slid late. The two defenders touched him, but mainly hit themselves. They basically tackled themselves. And he asked the ref. The ref said, "Yeah, that's roughing the." And Troy Aikman said, "Come on, what are you talking about? He's a running back. Once you leave the pocket, you're a running back. Running backs can't slide. They can't do that. I mean, they could, but they're going to get hit anywhere. At least touchdown. Listen, Patrick Mahomes, it looks like, Jack, if you're watching the Chiefs, I don't know if it's true or not, but it looks like he's getting special consideration. They said it about Tom Brady when Tom Brady played, that he kind of got special consideration. Peyton Manning kind of got special consideration. And I know Patrick Mahomes is the face, maybe the face of the league, maybe. But
you mentioned a great point.
Go ahead. But if he's going to be a running back, go ahead.
You just mentioned something, Mac, that's so thought-provoking. I never even thought of it. I don't know if anyone thought of it. The penalty called on the Texan players for supposedly hitting Patrick Mahomes when he was down. Okay? would that have been called on the Houston players if it was a running back, not Patrick Mahomes? Would they have flagged him? That should be the yardstick, because like Troy Aikman said, once he started running, he's no longer quarterback. He's a running back. If you would make the same call on, let's say, Pacheco, if they hit Pacheco the same way, then it's okay, you flagged him. But if you wouldn't make the call if the player were Pacheco with the ball, but you're making it because of Patrick Mahomes in that situation, that's flat out wrong, because he was a running back at that point.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen Lamar Jackson get rocked. I've seen Josh Allen get rocked. I've seen other quarterbacks get rocked. And this is why a lot of fans are upset with the Chiefs. Now, I don't blame the Chiefs. The Chiefs are doing whatever they can do to win. Whatever it is, they're going to try to do to win. That's what their job is, right? But when it looks like the refs are kind of siding with them, I don't know if they are or not. I'm not saying they are. A lot of people get upset.
But they didn't flag. When Patrick Mahomes slowed up a couple of inches or so before the sideline, before going out of bounds, and then he was pushed out of bounds, they didn't flag Houston on that play.
No, they did.
Okay,
No,
so the officials saw what was going on. I think what outraged people, the idea of what Patrick Mahomes is trying to do, and that hurts the spirit of the rule of protecting quarterbacks.
Right. Right.
A quarterback should be grateful for that rule, but instead, some of them take advantage of it. Patrick Mahomes is taking advantage of rules that are in place to protect him.
Exactly, Jack. And that's probably why Troy Aikman's getting so upset, right?
But listen, Patrick Mahomes, he didn't do anything illegal. We don't like it.
He did. It's not against
the league to, step in. And
yeah, exactly. Ben Johnson leaves Detroit. Their offensive coordinator leaves to go coach Chicago. I watch a lot of the shows on national streaming sports, and there's an NFC North show, and they talked about this. And Ben Johnson is not a former head coach. He's an offensive coordinator. So we really don't know what he's going to be like as a head coach. Maybe he's going to be great for Caleb Williams. That's all well and good. But we don't know what kind of head coach Ben Johnson's going to be. And it happens to all the good teams, Shaq. You see it. The San Francisco 49ers lose their defensive coordinator. Any good team, you're going to have coaches leave. The Cowboys, a couple coaches left. Not that they had a great year the year before, but they're competitive to push on to go somewhere else. So what do you think how is this going to affect Detroit, Jack? I mean, you saw how it affected the Eagles a year or two ago when they both offensive coordinators left. How do you think it's going to affect Detroit?
First of all, virtually every head coach was a coordinator before becoming a head coach, and they turned eventually into great head coaches, Vince Lombardi, Bill Belichick, et cetera. But we have so many misses as guys who are great coordinators. Losing their offensive coordinator, Ben Johnson, and they're going to be apparently losing their defensive coordinator, Aaron Glenn. We saw what it did to the Eagles last year. They had a year in transition, and it did affect them, and they finally got it together, with Fangio, this year on the defensive side, and Kellen Moore, offensively. But Detroit will be fine because they had a lot of injuries. Those guys are going to be back. Hutchinson, their great defensive end, is going to be back. So they're loaded with talent, Detroit. So they're number good, coordinators who are going to be out there. But, it's interesting with these coordinators. They get fired from one team because they're not getting it done. And then they get hired by another team. And we hear what a great hire, like since the Indianapolis Colts, they fired their coordinator, their defensive coordinator, Gus Bradley. And they just hired the Bengals defensive coordinator. And we hear, oh, what a great move. But the Bengals defense was bad this year. They were bad. So, but it's a new environment. So we're supposed to believe he's going to turn the team around. You don't know. There's talk about Aaron Glenn being the Jet head coach. Excellent chance now. That's how it appears. And there's talk about him getting Steve Wilks as his defensive coordinator. Well, a year ago, Steve Wilks was fired as the 49er defensive coordinator. So is he really going to come to the Jets and be a difference maker there for the positive? I don't know. Maybe he would be. I don't know. But with these coordinators, it's so much hit and miss. But I think the biggest story with Ben Johnson being head coach of the Bears, I think of all the vacancies, that's the best one. I think the Bears, with all their talent, are ready for a breakthrough. I think he's the right guy for the job. And I think the Bears absolutely are going to contend next year. Caleb Williams has that 1 year out of his way, a lot of mistakes he made, that he showed a lot of upside as well. And I think Ben Johnson is going to turn him into a better quarterback. That's the experience. I think they're going to gel. All those close losses this year, some of them are going to be victories next year.
Yeah, I think the Bears will get better too. You talk about Green Bay, who kind of fell off. I don't know how they're going to be next year. Talk about Minnesota, who fell off. We don't know what's going to happen there and their situation. And even Detroit, Jack. Expectations for Detroit were so high this year. And I think they're going to be pretty high again next year.
Yeah.
I mean, is Detroit that team we thought, or are they just a very good team that might make the championship, like the 49ers, might make the championship, 4 years, but that's it.
Well, 49ers at least got to a Super Bowl, okay? I mean, the Lions franchise has never been to a Super Bowl, so their feeling is at least get to a Super Bowl one time in our history, preferably win it. I just feel the Lions are too good not to make the playoffs next year. I understand how tough that division is. The Packers should have a good team. I mean, I can't imagine them not having a good team next year. The Bears, I feel, are going to be a lot better. And will the Vikings fall off a little? Probably. But, how much are the Vikings really going to fall off? They won't be 14-3, but let's say even the Vikings are 10-7 team or thereabouts. I don't know. If one of the four teams is to fall off, I get the feeling it would be Minnesota, most likely. The Bears aren't in a position to fall off because they were down, but they are going to get better. I think the Lions are going to be back, maybe not as favorites, but I have to believe that they're going to be in the mix next year. But this story might be like the 49ers minus getting to the Super Bowl.
Right.
In the mix, but that's not quite getting it done. But windows close for teams, but we don't know when they close. If you asked me at the beginning of this year, I would have thought, the Buffalo Bill window is basically closed. Maybe they could sneak into the playoffs as a wild card, but they're not going to be a force. And look at Buffalo now, 1 game away from the Super Bowl, 14-3 record during the year.
As I've said before, the window doesn't close with Buffalo as long as Josh Allen's the quarterback.
Was it 13-4? I think they were 13-4. I think they lost the last game to New England.
There is no window closing with Josh Allen there. I mean, that window is going to be open as long as he's in his prime.
You make it. Yeah. That's a good thing. You make another great man. You're on top of your game today, man. You're making good points that got me thinking. With a Josh Allen, you have a leader like that, a future Hall of Fame quarterback, a major difference maker, one of the top 3 quarterbacks in football. The window's always going to be open that way. They're always going to get the players around them, make moves and this and that. But then you look at the Lions. Jared Goff isn't in that class. He's a good quarterback, a good, solid quarterback who has gotten the team to the Super Bowl in the Rams. He's capable of getting the Lions to the Super Bowl, but he's not the one that's going to keep your window open. The defense is going to keep your window open. And, and the players like the running backs like Gibbs, etc., they're going to keep the window open.
I agree. Dallas, they lost their special teams coach. He went to Tennessee. He went to a worse team, Jack. I don't know what that means, but he said sayonara to Dallas. How long we keep hearing these names come out of Dallas. How does Jerry Jones wait I mean, he's going to do the draft anyway. I don't know if he takes any input from his head coaches anyway. How long before Dallas hires their head coach? Are they going to wait till after the draft, or what do you think?
The talk is Brian Schottenheimer now. He has had a little experience. He doesn't excite anyone. He's been a coordinator. He's been around a while. He's not a bad hire. He's not a so-called sexy hire where you're going to look, oh, wow, the fans like to look for a hire that kind of excites them. And Schottenheimer's not going to excite anyone, hiring him. But, he's competent. And, what hurt Dallas last year wasn't the moves they made. It's the moves they didn't make. Very few, very low-level moves. What are they going to do in the offseason? I mean, I can't imagine Dallas standing pat and just coming back with the same team, feeling, well, we lost some close games. We could make some adjustments. They were 7-10 last year. They don't want to come back and be 9-8. I mean, that doesn't do it. Can Dallas get back to a position that they were a couple of years ago, contending for the Super Bowl? It's going to be hard. I mean, Philadelphia is going to be good next year. Washington is going to be good next year. I mean, have they permanently, or in the foreseeable future, I should say, separated themselves from the Cowboys? That's the question going into next year. If the Cowboys can make some good off-season acquisitions, some moves, they could put themselves in the mix with those, Washington and Philadelphia for next year. If not, we're talking about a distant third.
I would agree. The all-rookie team was named Marvis Harrison Jr. He's not on the team. They got Thomas McConkey and Neighbors. I would have thought, Jack, now you think about all the quarterbacks, all the terrible quarterbacks the Giants had this year and the year Neighbors had. McConkey, who's on the Chargers, who's really a running team. McConkey kind of came alive for him. I would have thought Marvis Harrison Jr. would have had a great year with a steady quarterback. But, I mean, he didn't even get 1,000 yards this year. What do you think happened there? Do you think it's because of the quarterback, or do you think it's just the way they ran their offense? I mean, what do you think?
That is a good question. I don't know the answer, but apparently he didn't have great chemistry with Kyler Murray. I mean, periodically they would work very well together. Kyler Murray would kind of like to spread it out, spread the wealth, get everyone involved, which idealistically that's what you want to do. But when you have a talent like Marvin Harrison Jr., who's not a prima donna wide receiver, by all accounts, going back from when he played at Ohio State, he was a real team guy. You want to make him your main target. I mean, look, Malik Neighbors on the Giants, he's their main target. He should be. When you get these great receivers, you diminish them by spreading the ball all over, and they don't get a lot more throws to them than someone else. I mean, we see how it's hurt Garrett Wilson with the Jets. He hasn't been able to take off. I mean, if you have a great receiver, you have to target him more. He's not being selfish. He's not being a prima donna. It's that way in any sport. If you have a great scorer in basketball, you want to get him the ball more than other players because he's more likely to score. Something's going to have to be done. Marvin Harrison was very gracious after the season, Marvin Harrison Jr. He said he was kind of disappointed that he didn't play quite up to his standards. And, and the coach said, well, he had a good season, this and that. But no, he's a great player. He's a great talent, I should say. And he needs a chance to prove he's a great player. But I don't know will the chemistry with him and Kyler Murray quite get there. And I'm not saying Kyler Murray did anything wrong necessarily. Kyler Murray was trying to move the offense. And when you're quarterback, you have relationships with other players. And you want to accommodate everybody, keep everyone happy. And sometimes it's at the expense of someone who should really be your main impact player and isn't.
Well, see, I don't blame Kyle Murray that much. I kind of blame the offensive coordinator, right? If you have a receiver or whatever, like you said, your premier receiver, your premier running back, you're going to find a way to get them the ball. I've seen him do crazy things to get Malik Neighbors the ball, just to get him in the open, just to get him, one-on-one with somebody. I mean, they hand the ball off to him. Any way they could get the ball to Malik Neighbors, especially if he didn't have a catch or something, they did that. And when I watched some of the Cardinal games, I didn't watch them all for sure, Jack. I maybe watched 2 or 3 of them at the most. Harrison made a couple nice catches, but it seemed like they were in there, and I know they want to run the ball. Every team wants to run the ball. But now, I'm not saying Harrison is going to be a Hall of Famer, but he's going to be a really good wide receiver in this league. A top wide receiver. You've got to find ways to get him the ball, Jack.
Oh, and absolutely. I don't think his stock is dropped. Hypothetically, if Marvin Harrison was made available, the team's drafting high, one of them would step forward even now, and they would sign him. I mean, I can't imagine, a team picking high, not taking him. Maybe not with the first few picks right now, because we expect Cam Ward and Shador Stevenson to go off the board in the first few picks, and then there's Abdul Carter, Seth, and Travis Hunter. But Marvin Harrison would certainly go in the, top 10 picks for sure. One of the teams that step forward and still want him, because he hasn't, his own personal stock hasn't diminished. I think everyone sees it's the way he's been used. And you're right what you say. It's up to the coaches to find a way to get him more involved. Yeah, I believe so.
So when I look at the NFC West, NFC West, and we'll talk about the Cardinals, you had the Rams come back and put a run on again. You had the Seattle Seahawks that were, I think they were tied with the Rams, but the Rams had the tiebreaker.
7 each. That was a quiet 10-7 by
Seattle.
It seemed like they were worse
Very quiet.
than that. If you ask me, I didn't know any better, I think they were 7-10 or 8-9.
Yes.
They were actually 10-7.
Yes, they had a pretty good year. Do the Rams? I mean, there is a thing about Stafford. I just read again yesterday something about him might retire. He might retire, and I think if he retires, he's trying to do that to get out of his contract. But whatever, he might retire. What are the Rams? The Rams have got to pay Stafford, right? I mean, he brought him to the playoffs again. They played a great game. He played a great game against the Eagles. I mean, they didn't get blown away.
Well, I want to say played a great game. The last drive, they didn't get it done. I would go that far.
I would. I mean, the last drive sucked. I agree with
that. He played well all in all. He showed there's a lot left. Yeah.
Especially against a really good defense, right? I mean, the Eagles are no slouches on D. I think he played really well against them. But anyway, I mean, as the Rams, if you lose Stafford, and I don't know how you replace a guy who's probably the leader of the second bracket of quarterbacks, right? You got your first 4, and then you got your next. I think Stafford's still that good. You can't let him go, Jack.
No, they're not going to. They're going to work something out. They absolutely will. I mean, they're not going to go to their backup, Jimmy Garoppolo, the Rams. I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo's fine as a backup. I'm comfortable having him as a backup, but not as his starter for the year.
Jimmy G.
Seattle's got the same situation with Geno Smith. I mean, it's like they're sticking with Geno Smith these last few years by default. They're not drafting high enough to really get the young quarterback they want. And if they look at who's out there in the free agent market, they may as well stick with Geno Smith. They're not going to pay Sam Darnold big money to take over for Geno Smith, especially since they're maybe thinking that Geno Smith is maybe better even. Who knows? But Matthew Stafford, future Hall of Famer. He's got a lot left. He could be injury prone at times, and they'll work. They got to work something out. The Rams. They realistically, they have no choice but to do it. There are no other options. They're not drafting high enough, and they're not going to get anyone who's more likely to win with them next season than Matthew Stafford.
I agree.
Let me tell you that trade the Lions and with the Rams, the Lions got a bunch of players in the Matthew Stafford deal that are really helping their team, including their quarterback off. The draft choices they converted, so on. That was the ultimate win-win for both teams. The Rams got a Super Bowl win. The Lions got some really good players in return. And that's how deals should be.
I agree. Real quick in basketball, the Knicks beat the Nets 99-95. Towns with the 25 points. Interesting, D'Angelo Russell gets traded from the Lakers to the Nets, and he's the leading scorer for the Nets with 25 points. Why? How come they couldn't find a way to use D'Angelo Russell? Is it because LeBron's playing guard? And I mean, the guy is talented. I don't understand why you would get rid of somebody who could average 20, 25 points a game. I don't know what the Lakers are thinking.
Mac, I know what the Lakers were thinking. They found ways to use him. He just wasn't that good. He was given more than enough of an opportunity with the Lakers, and he wasn't going to be much better. He was a great talent coming out of Ohio State. The Nets got rid of him before. This is the second go-round with the Nets. And didn't he have two go-rounds with the Lakers, or maybe it was with the Timberwolves? I forgot for a moment.
It was a team. I don't think it was. It might have been the Lakers. It might have been.
But the point is, D'Angelo Russell will show up certain games and have a really good game, but he's what he is. I mean, he's lacked maturity at times, and I mean, he's a good piece to have, but he's not a game changer. I don't think anyone is critical of the Lakers for moving on from him. Towards the end of his stay with the Lakers, he was sitting on the bench more and more. Yeah. So I don't want to hear it was the Lakers, had to find a better way to utilize him. He wasn't a guy on the team. Clearly LeBron and Anthony Davis, that's the impact players. D'Angelo Russell just didn't make the full adjustment.
Denver destroys the 76ers 144-109 without Embiid, whose knee is swelling up again. So, he's only played 13 games so far this year, Jack, and his knee's swelling up, so he's going to be out for a while longer. 76ers are a mess. That team is just a mess.
I think the 76ers, if they could pull off a great deal for Embiid, a major haul getting back in return with draft picks, so on, make the deal now. 76ers are never winning a championship with Joel Embiid. Unless they catch lightning in the bottle and unexpectedly great player falls to them from somewhere. It's just not going to happen. Even if Jimmy Butler becomes a six again, they're not winning a championship. No. I mean, it's just not happening. No. I would move on if I have the right deal in place.
I mean, knee swelling, yelling at female refs, carrying. I mean, the guy is just out of control over there. I don't know what the heck he's thinking, especially this year. Today, Jack, we get the Nets at the Suns, Milwaukee at the Bucks at New Orleans, and Boston at the Clippers. So that's your games today to look forward to. Folks, we're near the top of the hour. Thank you for joining us on the Mac and Jack Sports Show Wednesday. We'll be back live Friday. We'll see you tonight on the National Professional Sports Show tonight at about 6 o'clock. So stay with us all day. As you know, Roku has a bunch of shows that will be coming up. Coffee and sports. We got the Tipton. We got Coast to Coast. We got everything you could think of. All mornings full. The nighttime's full. Stay with Roku and stay out of trouble. Have a great day, folks.